Thank you, Sony Pictures, for letting me watch Anyone But You early in a cinema all by myself so I could giggle and kick my feet as much as I wanted, and no one was there to judge me except for the theater employee who was overseeing things. I could never be with someone like him.
This girl's a disaster.
Hi, I'm Lady Genevieve, and it's been months building up to this moment, but we're finally here. I saw Anyone But You. And I did the film's official press junket. I know, no one is more shocked than I am. I'm going to section this video into 3 parts. Part 1 will be medium spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen the movie yet but wants to hear some of my thoughts about the material and thoughts on the film without having every minute detail given away in advance. Part 2 will be all of the spoilers, and Part 3 I just want to talk about my experience getting to do the junket because I'm still feeling a bit dazed about that, and also share some of my hopes for the future of this film and the genre within the larger ecosystem of Hollywood. If you want a very broad, very vague bit of feedback before I get into all of those things, though, I will simply say that I loved Anyone But You. I had very high hopes because of how much I love that golden era of Hollywood modern literary adaptations, many of which were comedies, and I was so hoping that this would be a revival of sorts of the concept. I was very specific about what I wanted Anyone But You to do when I spoke about the film in the videos I made about it in the months leading up to its release, and basically everything that I said I wanted was in fact delivered. That's probably a good place to start as we move into medium spoilers. I want to go through a list of some of the things I specifically said I wanted or said that I loved about the genre of rom-coms, or more specifically of modern literary adaptations, that Anyone But You delivered. Or it also could be classified as things I predicted. For one, I predicted that Dermot Mulroney would play Leonato, except in this film he goes by Leo. I said that I hoped they would quote the source material, and they did repeatedly. You can hear quotes sprinkled in by characters in their dialogue, and you can also find extra quotes hidden in the set dressing. I love how much work director Will Gluck put into accomplishing that specific detail. We talked about that in the interview I already published. Go watch it if you haven't already. And even if you have watched it, go watch it again because I had so much fun doing that.
You're probably the only one that's ever going to realize that the first line is not from Much Ado About Nothing. And you would also be kind of shocked to hear that over 70% of the people have no idea where those quotes are from.
More specifically, I also said that if they needed a specific place to slip in a quote, they could put one in the wedding vows, because that's a place where you can more easily include fancy Shakespearean language without overly confusing the section of the audience that does not know that the film is a modern Shakespeare adaptation. Well, guess what? There was a Shakespeare quote, a Much Ado About Nothing quote in the wedding vows. I emphasized that rom-coms are about banter and vibes, and when it's one where the main couple is based on Benedict and Beatrice from William Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing, you need to have some good bickering also thrown into the mix. Well, we got all of those things. I made a point of talking about how a lot of these rom-coms or comedies will showcase a diegetic song that is significant in some way. There's usually some sort of emotional revelation or turning point that is entangled with the song. We get that concept in Anyone But You. I said that I did not want Ben to be a cop, and he wasn't. Now, unfortunately, his character is some sort of Wall Street bro, which is not that much better, but I will take it anyway. In my first video I made when I read the synopsis of the film that had been published on one of the film's production company's websites, that synopsis claimed that the couple had hooked up previously while they were in university and that the characters were in their late 20s. And during that point, I made a joke calling Glen Powell old, not because I actually think he's old, but I just don't think he looks like he's in his late 20s, and I was being facetious about that. Well, this movie constantly makes jokes at Ben's expense about him being old, or at the very least older than B, jokes about there being an age difference between them, and it's almost refreshing in a way when you take a step back to ponder ponder how frequently Hollywood normalizes this propensity for men to get older and still somehow have 20-something-year-old love interests. I said I wanted to see some really good physical comedy in the film, especially for Ben, because I had referenced the Kenneth Branagh Much Ado About Nothing film and how funny I find the part where he's messing with the chair. They gave Glen Powell so many funny things to do. I enjoyed that thoroughly. They really put Ben through it in Anyone But You, and it was just so much fun to watch. In general, it was uncanny to see how many things I said I wanted to see, and I was so specific about these things, and they were playing out in front of my eyes. I just had to stop and ponder, oh my gosh, someone from Sony Pictures might have watched my videos and think that I hacked their system and watched their movie early, and I'm now leaking it online. For legal purposes, let me just say that I have no idea how to hack a major film studio, so if that's happening again to you, Sony, it wasn't me. I asked both sets of talent during the Anyone But You junket about the film's physical comedy because it was just something that really stood out to me. You always hope that you'll get to see really fun physical comedy in this genre. The amount of it can vary from film to film, of course, but it's usually somewhere in the mix. But the way that physical comedy is so intertwined with revelations and explorations of both of these main characters was such a treat to watch. This, along with the way that Benedict was adapted, were some of the most revelatory aspects of watching the film for the first time, in a cinema no less. I think that the approach to B was about what I would have expected it to be, but Ben just felt so different from a lot of the male rom-com leads that I've watched. I feel like there's this element of fantasy or perfection that a lot of male rom-com leads tend to have because you're playing into a fantasy for the audience. I don't know how to quite explain it because it's not so much that those characters come across as flawless or superficial, but there's just something about the way Ben behaves in this film, the way that things are revealed about him, where it really felt like you were peeling back layers of who this character was to an extent that I'm just not used to seeing happen with other male rom-com leads. Even the ones that I would pluck out as being from some of my favorite rom-coms. They were not in any way afraid to make Ben look silly or goofy, but ultimately that makes him more endearing and compelling as a lead character. You root for him because he's not this superficially appealing rom-com lead. He feels deconstructed in a way that I would love to see happen more in what I really hope will be the start of a new era of rom-coms made for the cinema. It just felt so current and fresh. I had some people writing to me directly or people that were just speaking into the internet questioning whether or not they thought that Sydney Sweeney would be able to do comedy or the type of comedy that would be in this film. I said early on that I personally had no opinion one way or another because I had never seen her do a rom-com before, or maybe I had said that I hadn't seen her do this type of comedy before. It was something to that effect, but I had approached all of that with an open mind. I was more than prepared to give her room to fulfill the assignment. Now, what I did not know in the lead up to this film's release is that Sydney was not only one of the main leads of the film, but she was an executive producer of the movie. When I saw the film at my early press screening, I saw her name pop up in the end credits as an executive producer, and that piqued my interest. So, of course, I had to quickly ask her a bit about that during the film's junket. If I had known that she was so heavily involved with the development of the film in the first place, I feel like I would have been a lot more severe about shutting down the people questioning her commitment or her ability to do comedy to the level that they were before even seeing the film. Given the amount of work it takes to develop a film, I am willing to give her the room to work on building up her comedy toolkit if it was in any way lacking in the first place. And she did perfectly fine in this film. Not to mention, I don't really understand why people were so intense about questioning whether or not she was going to be able to be funny, considering that when you go to see a rom-com, it's not necessarily a given that the lead performers themselves have to be funny in an obvious way. It really just depends on the movie, the story, and the character. If I use Kate and Leopold as an example, because that's another one of my favorite rom-coms, Meg Ryan is not there to be funny in a traditional sense. A lot of the comedy in that film comes from the fish out of water premise of having a duke accidentally travel from his time period to the early 2000s. Do I think that Glen is funnier than Sidney and Anyone But You? Sure, but I also think his character has more comedic bits that are specifically written at his expense. She still has comedic sequences and physical comedy that she fully threw herself into as a performer. But overall, Glen and Sidney worked very well as both individual performers and as a duo. The other point I would say in this medium spoiler section that I like about the film is that it's very effective in a way that my other favorite comedies of 2023 have tended to be. There are so many funny, outlandish, bombastic, comedic things, but when it comes time to get to that third act, whether you anticipated it or not, you have gotten invested in these characters, in the relationship, and you feel really deeply that you need to see them get together. At least that's how it was for me watching it. You want comedies like these to connect to you, emotionally speaking. If it can get under your skin in that way, that's ultimately what's going to create the staying power where you want to keep coming back and revisiting that film and those characters and their relationship. I understand why these comedies tend to focus on the louder, bombastic moments for marketing purposes, but it's so important for me to communicate that if people do decide to keep making movies like these, they need to always remember that they need to emotionally resonate as well. It's not just about the loud comedy. These aren't comedies where you're only trying to make the audience laugh. You need to get us emotionally invested. And Anyone But You absolutely did that. If there was one thing for me to nitpick, and this is something that is so specific to me, the runtime of this film is about 1 hour and 45 minutes. I would not have been upset if you had extended that runtime by a couple of minutes and given those minutes to Dermot Mulroney to do more jokes. Is this a note that has any bearing on the wider audience? I don't believe so, but this is my channel, my opinions. And as a wedding date girly, the fact that you have boats in this movie and you didn't make some sort of full circle reference for Dermot to make a boat joke, but this time he's the dad of the main girl instead of the love interest of the main girl, maybe it was a missed opportunity. I don't know. Now let's talk about heavy spoilers, because I'm just assuming that more people are going to come and watch this video after the film is already out and after they've been able to go and see it in full and want someone else to figuratively on an internet level go to brunch with and talk about this fun new rom-com that they just saw. I have to say that I loved the bit on the plane, both as a comedic bit of physical comedy, but also for how it plants this seed that doesn't bloom until further into the story. Specifically, I'm talking about Bea trying to steal Ben's cookie, and that's how she is able to overhear him listening to Natasha Bedingfield. When I first heard that song playing, I was delighted because I love Natasha Bedingfield. I still to this day have CDs of hers that I bought so many years ago. Initially, I thought that this was just an Easter egg for Will Gluck to do an acknowledgement of sorts of him being already well known for a Natasha Bedingfield reference that was in Easy A, but he claims that this wasn't the case. Was this your approach to meta now becoming self-referential because you're already known for doing a Natasha Bedingfield reference?
No, I will tell you no. And it wasn't until I decided on that song, 2 weeks before shooting, that my music supervisor, who's done all my movies forever, reminded me that was also Natasha Bedingfield. And I said, well, I guess I chose that song so it's pure. It's absolutely pure. I didn't do it for any reason. So that was it was a complete accident.
But what I wasn't expecting was for that reveal to come back into the story in such a funny and heartwarming way. And you're also intertwining all of that with an ongoing series of Titanic references, which naturally I appreciate because I love James Cameron. He's one of my favorite filmmakers because he's just like me. He's a romance girly. Every new movie he brings, you're going to get romance and you're going to get anti-imperialism. But this reveal with the Natasha Bedingfield song, it plays so beautifully into this ongoing dynamic of them learning to care for one another and put themselves out there in a way that they're perhaps a bit afraid to do. Ben's not good at swimming long distances, but he doesn't hesitate to jump overboard to make sure that she's okay after she fell in. Ben's also afraid of flying, so she takes it upon herself to sing him his Serenity song to make sure he's doing okay, emotionally speaking. In preparing to do the film's junket, I did a couple of hours of research into Will Gluck, and he talked a lot about wanting his characters to be aware of pop culture references, story and genre tropes, things of that nature. So you will often see his main characters acknowledging the conventions of the story that they exist in. In the case of Anyone But You, I really liked how there's this ongoing cat and mouse dynamic between Ben and Bee and the rest of the characters in the ensemble. You have the other characters trying to conspire to get Ben and Bee together, but Bee is able to quickly recognize what the group is trying to do, and that helps to facilitate them formulating their own scheme to pretend to be together to benefit their own interests, which for Bee, it's to keep her ex away, and for Ben, it's trying to get his ex back. But then at the very end, when the brides, Hallie and Claudia, are able to successfully pull a little scheme that Ben and Bee do fall for, it just kept this energy and momentum in the story and added a little something extra to the general structure that we all know and love for this genre of storytelling. We know they're going to get together in the end. That's why we got tickets to see it in the first place. We will not be satisfied if Ben and Bee don't reconcile before the credits roll. But it's still fun to get that little extra twist thrown into the mix on the way to our final destination. One thing I wasn't really expecting was that Sydney Sweeney and Darren Barnet had really good chemistry. Not that I thought there would be nothing there, but when they had their scenes one-on-one together, I don't know, I could just really see that these characters must have had a really happy relationship together, even if it didn't work out. There's all this history between them. It had me going, wait a minute, does Ben have competition? Is she going to get pulled back in this direction? Because maybe I wouldn't be mad about that. It would add a little more drama into the mix where she's falling back into something with her ex before deciding to ultimately be with Ben. I don't know. Or maybe all of this is just communicating that Darren Barnet needs to get to headline his own studio rom-com. I still have not watched the final season of Never Have I Ever because I just knew Mindy Kaling was going to be on some nonsense and not have her main girl end up with an Asian guy. I know her modus operandi at this point. Maybe Will Gluck will be generous to us rom-com girlies, spare some crumbs, and produce another rom-com where Darren can be the main guy. If he's too busy to direct it himself, he can just hand it off to someone else that he believes to be capable at handling this genre of storytelling to a high degree. The other thing I wanted to talk about in a bit more detail is Ben. Again, I found so many details of his characterization, the physical comedy, just everything about him to be so funny and endearing. Right from the very beginning of us meeting him in a coffee shop, which, first of all, perfect location. That is a romance classic for a meet cute.
Well, this was some meet cute.
When he's waiting for Bee, and she's struggling with the hand dryer, and he pulls his shirt out. Initially, I was confused. It was about a split second where I was going, wait, what is he doing? What's wrong with his shirt? But then it immediately hit me. Oh my God. He's nervous. He has a crush. And it was so cute. I wanted to scream. And I probably could have. I was literally the only person at my screening. The fact that the phrase hot girl fit was in this movie and it was used to describe Ben, that was just so funny to me. I love that they were mocking his appearance without being mean-spirited, of course, because it's just tapping into this larger idea of how obsessed a certain culture has become with appearance over functionality. Isn't it kind of absurd to put so much effort into exercising and training and presumably your diet as well so you can have a body that looks like that, but then you don't even have the athleticism to show for it? That's funny and smart. That's just my type of joke. That's why I love Kat Stratford so much.
Swollen. Turgid. Tumescent. Perfect.
But yes, he's not a strong swimmer. He's afraid of flying. He's just afraid in general of being hurt. And that's presented in such a raw way where I'm not sure I've seen a male rom-com lead be stripped emotionally bare to the degree that they did with him when so much of the tone of the film is as fun and silly as it is. When I think back to so many of the rom-coms that I watch and love, it's so rare to probe this deeply into the male lead's emotional fears, and it was so great to watch. You know what it was giving me? It's giving me Michael Carrington. Grease 2, baby. But the difference is that Michael Carrington had to create an entire cool writer persona to shake things up in his circumstances, whereas Ben needs to strip away his fuckboy cool guy persona in order to be able to get the girl. Finally, I want to talk a bit about what I want for the future of this film, the genre in general, and reflect on a couple of tidbits about getting to participate in the junket. I'm going to see this film on opening weekend. It doesn't matter if I've already seen it. I might even go see it more than once on opening weekend. I haven't decided yet. We'll just have to wait and see. I'm going to be using so many of my weekly movie passes to rewatch the film because, well, to be frank, there's no new Avatar film coming out this year, so there's really not much competition for keeping and maintaining my attention at the cinema. Probably once a week, I would say, during its theatrical run, give or take. That's what I'm anticipating I'll end up doing. I will absolutely be getting this film on physical media whenever it's released. I really hope they include some good behind-the-scenes stuff, maybe a blooper reel or some deleted scenes, bring us back to the classic days of jam-packed DVDs. But more than anything, what I really want, I want a commentary track. Sydney Sweeney, how are you going to put all this work into developing this film, picking your leading man, picking your director, and selling it to Sony just to not do a commentary track? I still think about the She's the Man cast commentary track at least once a week. It's been years, and I still remember how I would wear that thing out on the DVD. The amount of funny jokes and stories and anecdotes from making the film that they all shared, and just getting to hear the cast's chemistry together. Oh, and it's all the more cherished to me now that Amanda Bynes isn't even active as an actress anymore. You can't just call her up to do new retrospective interviews about the movie. She's got other things going on. And commentary tracks in general are such an undervalued part of preserving film history. Just imagine for a moment if we had the technology back in the day to have Orson Welles doing commentary tracks for all of his movies. Imagine how much iconic trash talking and name dropping we would have to go back and listen to. Oh, I think about that more often than I should. I need a commentary track. That's my point. Sydney, Glenn, will get together for a couple of hours, record it, put it on the DVD, and if the studio tries to tell you no, just do a Rian Johnson and record one anyway and put it on the internet for everyone to enjoy and preserve. Do it for the culture, for rom-com girlies everywhere. We want it, we need it. I need this movie to be successful. This is just me reiterating things I've already said in past videos, but I will reiterate them nonetheless because I need this film to be a hit because I need more rom-coms, even more so if they're modern literary adaptations because those are extra fun, back in the cinema. After going through a very dark period of watching so many direct-to-streaming rom-coms or originals in general, do you know how much of a relief it was to watch a rom-com with an actual budget on a big screen in a cinema? All the streaming rom-coms look like Hallmark movies, and we need to stop validating these companies with their cheap corner cutting. It's unacceptable, and I, for one, will not stand for it. Okay, now let me just talk about a couple of things pertaining to me doing the junket. That opening line I used on Glenn and Sydney, I kid you not, I had that thing in my head for a good 5 or 6 months. I would just daydream about the hypothetical scenario in which I could somehow get myself on the Anyone But You junket, and then my brainstorming wheels started turning, and then I thought of my opener. I had an actual conversation about this with a friend of mine at San Diego Comic-Con over this summer, and the fact that it actually ended up happening and I got to deliver it to its intended recipient, that is wild. This is a career milestone. It's my first time ever interviewing a Spy Kid. Now, as a fanatic of modern literature, my first question for the actors, if you've watched the interview, you know this, was about the source material. And they sort of exchanged looks with each other that made it look like they were surprised that someone was asking about the source material. I don't know for sure if that is the case and that's how they felt. I'm just speculating, of course. But if it is what they were feeling, How has no one else asked you about the source material? Isn't that a very typical question to ask when something gets adapted? It's not unheard of for superhero movie junkets to have a ton of questions in the mix about the comics. Why wouldn't you ask the stars of Anyone But You about the source material? What aspects of Benedict and Beatrice did you pull from William Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing? And what ways did you aim to make these characters your own?
Ooh, that's a really good question.
Will Gluck, however, did not seem surprised by me bringing up the source material, but I had already had a bit of communication with him beforehand, so I think he already knew that I knew that it was a Shakespeare adaptation and that it was a particular point of interest for me when it came to this project. I won't deny that it was stressful to only have 5 minutes with the two lead actors, and I was trying to curate my questions, but I'm glad that I had a little bit more time with director Will Gluck, and from what I can tell, a lot of the junket slots for Glenn and Sydney were 5 minutes long, even if you were a significantly larger outlet than myself. We're talking major corporations. Fair is fair, I suppose. Give it up to Sony. Still, if there was ever a way to get the main talent for longer than 5 or 10 minutes, believe me, I would be more than capable of having a very thorough conversation about the fact that they gave me a new modern literary rom-com. I have a lot of thoughts about the concept, the material, and the execution. When I asked the subjects of these interviews what their Serenity songs were, I just want to share with all of you, my viewers, if you've made it this far and you even care, I had a whole list of possible songs I considered giving if it were to come up of what is my Serenity song. Right now, my more realistic answer to that question is Don't Worry by Madcon, but I just didn't know if they would be familiar with an Afro-Norwegian music duo. I also considered saying Try Again by Alia, or Love Like This by Faith Evans, or It's Like That by Mariah Carey, because those are just some of the songs that I keep replaying whenever I want to lift my mood. But I decided that ultimately I wanted to give an answer that would facilitate something that would pop a bit more on camera and in the edit. And it's December and we're celebrating rom-coms. So of course my brain started to wander over to The Holiday, which is one of the best rom-coms to watch in December, or any month for that matter, but especially during the winter holiday season. And clearly my answer went over well enough. Now the Josie and the Pussycats thing, do you know how agonizing that was for me? To have Glen Powell bring up my Josie and the Pussycats poster at the very end of my interview slot, which was already a short interview slot to begin with, so there was not enough time to talk about the movie. But I don't care if you're Glen Powell or you're just a random person tuning in and leaving a comment on any one of my videos. If you bring up Josie and the Pussycats because you saw it on my wall and you're giving this movie the flowers it deserves, I will probably want to talk about that. But I wanted to share a fun little update about the Josie and the Pussycats reference. I clipped that part of my interview in order to share it on my socials, try to get more people to watch my interviews, as well as watch Anyone But You when it comes out in cinemas December 22nd. And when I posted it as a reel, I tagged the directors and screenwriters of Josie and the Pussycats, and one of them, Deborah Kaplan, she saw the reel and she liked it, so I messaged her to send my regards and my compliments to the movie, and I'm just so happy that she got to see little old me giving her movie a shout out and getting a big actor to shout it out as well. I never could have predicted that Glen Powell likes Josie and the Pussycats. I never would have guessed that, but I'm glad that we could uplift more art that deserves recognition. If you've made it this far into my video, thank you so much for watching, and thank you to everyone who has supported my ongoing ramblings about modern literary rom-coms, about Anyone But You, and thank you to the people that sent me kind words and comments about the fact that after all of these months of me not shutting up about this movie, I got to see it early, I got to participate in the junket, and I'm so happy about that. Go see Anyone But You now in cinemas. I got some comments from people in Europe who were saying that they're going to have to wait another month for it to release in their region. So to those folks, I will say go see the movie in a month from now. Whenever it's available to you in cinemas, go see it in the cinema. Support modern literary rom-coms making a comeback in the cinema. We need more movies like this. I want more movies like this. Stay tuned for my end of the year ranking video of my favorite films of 2023. And spoiler alert, Anyone But You has done very well among the over 100 2023 films I've seen this year, and it will be on that list somewhere. Thank you to my patrons. See you in the next one. Bye.